So Trish, you have just received the 2026 APA Herbal Insight Award in recognition of the significant impact you have made on furthering knowledge and understanding botanicals and their use. Can you tell us more about that?
Well, this is a great honor, and it's always nice to be recognized anytime in your career. I think that there are several things that stand out for me that I deserve this recognition. One I mentioned a little earlier in starting the Botanical Raw Materials Committee within APA. That was really important. And in 2006, along with Joseph Brinkman and Edward Fletcher, we wrote the first GACP document for APA. And the reason I highlight that was because we were looking for guidelines on quality and issues in the field, wildcrafting, cultivating, etc. WHO just wasn't enough for the herbal industry. It was basic, but we had some more specific guidelines that we wanted to include in there. And so we worked really hard to put those things in place in 2006. But the whole thing about identity is something I've stood up for. People may be tired of me saying it, but still an issue. And it was valuable, even to the point that, FDA finally said, okay, we need 3 forms of identity, because I kept standing up and doing that. And I encourage people to stand up, to say things that are important, make sure they are important, and have programs that you can suggest successfully, because that's what makes us successful. And especially if it's relating to quality, which I think a lot of my work has been. When I was young, my mom had a best friend, and they were great together. And my mom's friend would come over and help her plant. And I was part of that. That was exciting to me. And I always kept that in my heart and mind for some reason. I didn't know if I wanted to study biochemistry, but what I was looking for is what's in plants that make them so special. That's that magic. Is that nutrition? Is that biochemistry? And one of the graduate groups at Cornell, the guy said, you want to go talk to David, about this. And sure enough, he said, you want to study ethnobotany. So I started asking everyone about horticulture and biochemistry and nutrition and just all of it. But I ended up coming back to ethnobotany because I was raised with a very strong sense of community. And so the community aspect, along with the phantasmic part of plants and what they do medicinally, joined in that. But I knew I didn't want to be an academic. So what I found and where I could help was certainly identification of materials. And that flabbergasted me from the beginning, if that's the proper term, to that no one was identifying the plants. And I was involved with APA, and I remember a conversation with Michael McGuffin, who's recently passed away, and I said, we're not identifying things. We need to work on this. And he said, what do you want to do, Trish? And what spurred from that was actually the Botanical Raw Material Committee. Yes, I try to stay focused on quality. Once I had my master's degree with an emphasis in ethnobotany, the job I found was at Celestial Seasonings in the laboratory. And that was the basis for my career right there, was to learn quality first. And that has helped me on every step of my career, because I'm always looking at that parameter to be able to create a project that always has those questions in mind. Are we doing the right thing? Are we benefiting the land? Are we benefiting the people? Is this financially feasible? Is this the right price to be paying for this? And should we be using this plant at all? I think traditional botany has been seeing that compromise ever since molecular genetics and molecular biology kind of came on the scene. Funding for herbaria that are our libraries of reference materials has disappeared because the money was coming in for the genetics and the molecular work. And I think that's still true, but classical botany is the basis for all of it. You can't do chemistry without it. You can't even do molecular stuff. Sometimes you need your references to be able to do that. There's several examples of, in particular, chemists, natural products chemists, who are very qualified, working on the wrong plant because it wasn't identified. And not knowing that till after they're done with their PhD or after these are published. And even most of the publications in natural products chemistry aren't vouchered materials. So who knows if the results are accurate, if we should even be using some of those plants. And there's a lot of adulteration still.
So really the gold standard that we should be shooting for is vouchered reference materials, right?
Right. The government requires 3 methods for identification. So a botanical identification and a chemical identification, and then often a sensory evaluation can be another one.
Chemical identification is really fit for purpose. It's not always one thing.
So a vouchered BRM is differentiated from BRM because it has gone through the pedigree of either classical botany, or usually vouchered then would include, it could include HPTLC, but it's still been vouchered, the original material that's being used as a reference. It's a differentiation because a lot of BRMs are not thoroughly investigated to confirm identification. People gravitate to the chemistry so much faster than they do to the botany, and I don't see why. That's a more expensive methodology. Every decent town, by size mostly, has a university or something that you can call on to understand what a herbarium is. And when I asked them, they were saying, oh, we have to have a chromatogram. But a reference material like a voucher is indeed like a chromatogram. You have the different parts of the plant. They have to be in a certain order. They have to be identified. They have to be described. And that's not unlike reading a TLC plate. Vouchers are used in courts of law when there's a question of identification, adverse reaction, any of these things that identification would be critical for. Maybe species is an infringement, and that's also a legal question. But so vouchers are used quite a bit. I look to my elders, those whose shoulders I stood on and who really helped me when I was feeling confused. So I want to honor all the people who helped me along my career. And I'd like to request that younger people remember that. They remember what's important to create the quality that has been the groundwork of this industry. The herbalists who became herbal companies that really understood the plants thoroughly, and to really look at all parts of that, not get into these small rabbit holes, pigeonholes, or especially when looking at science, if we're going to start using AI to give us all these answers. Nothing should be accepted without really rigorous verification or validation, however you want to say it.